ورسول الله صلى الله عليه وسلم يقول كل بدعة ضلالة.
First of all, in the past number of years, we've seen in the media, in the press, in many articles written by officials within some of these Western governments, linking the source of these terrorist activities with the Salafiyyah and with Salafiyyah specifically. Before that, you didn't really see any mention of the Salafis. You heard mentions of Wahhabis in general, but now increasingly so you see the mention of, or you hear the mention of the Salafis. And as people who've been upon the Salafi da'wah, we as Salafis who've been upon this da'wah and who've been following the ulama, the scholars of the Salafi da'wah in the past 10 to 15 years, we know that this is an absolute fabrication. It's an absolute fabrication. And to go further than this, many of these writings or these reports, they go further and they link or they claim that the likes of Hassan al-Banna, the likes of Sayyid Qutb, and the likes of Bin Laden, and the likes and people of their nature, that these are people who are Salafis, and that this radical or extreme form of Islam that they preach is Salafiyyah. So there are two issues which follow on from this. First of all, that it's important as Salafis that we expend as much effort as possible to free Salafiyyah from the likes of these misconceptions which are spread in the media. Why? Because the end result of that will fall back upon the Salafis, or the harms will fall back upon the Salafis. That's the first thing. The second thing is that, again, we as Salafis know that the reason why these actions have occurred, or the reason why these activities occur, whether they are in the Muslim lands, like in Egypt, or in Saudi Arabia, or in Syria, or whatever these actions have occurred, or whether they are in the Western lands, these actions have certain core or fundamental principles upon which they are based upon. They haven't just happened overnight. Rather, there are ideologies which have been in existence or which have been promoted for many, many years or for decades, which have eventually led to the occurrence of these actions. And again, we as Salafis should be familiar from the refutations of our scholars of certain figureheads. Some of them you recognize, such as Sayyid Qutb and Maududi and Bin Laden and Muhammad Surur and Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq. These are all common names to us, inshallah, as Salafis. If we look at the specific aspects for which they were refuted and criticized and declared as innovators, you will find that these are the very, by the Salafi scholars, these are the specific concepts upon which these terrorist ideologies are based upon. For example, this idea of social injustice, the absence of social injustice. And as you've probably already heard in some of the lectures earlier, that this itself was the very reason why Dhul Khuwaisara at-Tamimi, the father of the Khawarij, this is the reason why he criticized the Messenger ﷺ. When the Messenger ﷺ, he divided the booty, this man wasn't happy. He considered it to be unjust, socially unjust. So he challenged the Messenger ﷺ in that regard. This same concept, this social injustice, was the very same thing that the likes of Maududi and Sayyid Qutb wrote their books. They wrote their books on this subject. There's one aspect. Second aspect is the issue of Hakimiyyah. Hakimiyyah. Again, we heard in the last 10 to 15 years, these people coming with Tawheedul Hakimiyyah. And before them, Qutb bringing this Hakimiyyah, and Maududi bringing Al-Hakimiyyah. Again, this goes back again to the Khawarij of old, when they criticized Ali radiallahu anhu and they came out chanting, Inil hukmu illa lillah, the very same thing. This is another core concept, if you like, upon which these ideologies of terrorism are built. Likewise, the issues of takfir, when we've seen the spread of this takfir in contemporary times, directly as a result of the books of Sayyid Qutb and Maududi, and they've spread throughout the lands and creating turmoil wherever they've been found, like in Algeria, like in Egypt, like in Saudi Arabia now, especially in the past 5 to 10 years, and other places. And again, this was the same thing that the Khawarij were upon. Similarly, rebellions, overthrows and rebellions, something that's revived by Maududi first and foremost, when he's described the call of the messengers as being nothing except to remove the thrones of the tyrants and to bring the Islamic government in place. This is how he's portrayed the calls of the messengers and prophets. So the point being here, that if you look at each of these core principles upon which the Khawarij and the Irhabiyun, which they are upon, and which lead them eventually to start attacking or rebelling against the rulers and attacking the Muslims and killing the Muslims and so on and so forth, we find that the Salafi scholars, the Salafi ulama, from a very long time ago, from decades, they are the ones who have been fighting and refuting these specific roots of terrorism. These are the specific roots of terrorism which lead to the actions that we see today. So, for example, amongst the affairs that we can clearly see, we've seen the likes of Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Baz, rahimahullah, and other than him, refuting the incident which occurred in Mecca almost 2 to 3 decades ago, when these people, Juhayman, when they stormed the Haram, when they took the Haram, and the scholars after that, they refuted the likes of these people and the actions which they committed. Similarly, we saw the scholars refuting the likes of Ibn Ladin and Al-Mas'ari and Al-Faqih, and the latter two are people who were inciting rebellion within Saudi Arabia, and they fled that country and they sought asylum in this country. The scholars, like Sheikh Ibn Baz and many others, they spoke about them and they warned them and they threatened them. Basically, they said that this is a disastrous path that you are taking, return from it and recant from it. Similarly, Sheikh Zayd al-Madkhali, hafidhahullah, he wrote a very well-known and famous book now called Al-Irhab, in which he discusses the roots of this irhab. He mentions all of these incidents which have been happening in the Muslim lands, in Egypt, in Algeria, in Syria, other than that, and mentioning the specific figureheads behind these movements, like Sayyid Qutb, Hassan al-Banna, Maududi, and Muhammad Surur, and their stooges within Saudi Arabia, like Salman al-Auda and Safar al-Hawali, and also these takfiris who appeared in most recent times, refuting and mentioning all of them in that book. Likewise, you have all of the books of Shaykh Rabi', hafidhahullah, destroying and demolishing the manhaj of Sayyid Qutb, not just in takfir, but also his ignorance in many affairs of the Islamic Aqidah. So the Shaykh refuted him on the issues of takfir and hakimiyya and the social injustice that he built many of his books upon, his attacks upon some of the prophets of Allah like Musa alayhi salam, his attacks upon the Sahaba, and much more than that. So Shaykh Rabi has played an instrumental role in destroying and demolishing and removing this picture that was promoted by the Ikhwan al-Muslimin, that Sayyid Qutb is a mujaddid, is a reviver, that he's like Shaykh al-Islam Ibn Taymiyyah and other many fanciful and very strange claims that they made. And Shaykh Rabi has played a great role in demolishing that false picture, alhamdulillah. And similarly, you find the scholars refuting the likes of Abdurrahman Abdul Khaliq and his books. Again, Shaykh Rabi has played a great role in that, and specifically the issues on Tawheed al-Hakimiyyah and these, the Jama'at and so on and so forth, which the innovations which he brought. We could go on and on and on and on, but the point that we're trying to make here is that this claim, which is made or which is being made now in the media, that the Salafis are, that this sect of the Salafis, that they are directly linked to terrorism, this is batil, it's falsehood, and it's upon us to make this absolutely clear to the non-Muslims and to the media and so on and so forth. That's one aspect. And the second aspect is you see many Muslims, unfortunately, saying the same thing, that it's these Wahhabis, It's these Salafis, and it's because of their ignorance of many of the issues that we've discussed.